Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning class and welcome back to my course Partition of India in Print Media and Cinema. We are going to talk today about womanhood and motherhood, a topic that we have been discussing in our previous lecture. We will further build on this topic, right. So, the idea of woman as goddess has inspired in terms of its anti-colonial struggles. It has been a beaconing image and symbol, especially at the turn of the century. We see that the image, the goddess as the symbol, as someone that inspires the Swadeshi, the freedom fighter, has loomed large in the belief system, and it had its own mass appeal. So, when we talk of the goddess, it is slightly misleading. We need to understand that in the Hindu pantheon, of course, the idea of goddess is inspired from what today we know as Hinduism. So, we have to understand that the term Hinduism is relatively a new coinage. A better term to facilitate our understanding of the goddess would be the Sanatan Dharma. And like we already discussed before, the idea of the goddess is a pre-Aryan concept that has been appropriated and utilized for new socio-cultural meanings. So, the goddess as such is a very sweeping term. We understand that the Hindu pantheon includes a number of female deities. Depending on the qualities that we worship, the goddess could be actually divided into, traditionally she could be understood as the benign or the less forceful, and someone that is more fierce. So, the less forceful would be a figure such as Lakshmi, and the more forceful the ones that inspire the nationalist heroes, the fighters, that the goddesses that are invoked, mainly Kali and Durga. So, based on the characteristics, their appearance, their mobility, their residence, so their priests and modes of worshipping, we could largely classify goddesses as benign and fierce. So, in the context of the anti-colonial movements, the independence, the freedom movements, the goddesses that were invoked were usually either Kali or Durga. We see these two figures coming back again and again in writings, in so many different artworks, and this was regardless of any community. So, from Bengal we had eminent poet Qazi Nazrul Islam. He was from the Muslim community, he was a Bengali Muslim, but he wrote so many songs and poems on goddess Kali, a goddess that is worshipped especially in the eastern part of India. So, we see that these two goddesses, Kali and Durga, are invoked at the time of war, and they are embodied as deities without consorts. So, that makes their image more omnipotent, omniscient. They are not seen, they are not imagined as goddesses with consorts, right. So, they symbolize the total Shakti, the feminine principle of power in entirety, the cosmic principle, the feminine cosmic principle of power in entirety, right. So, we see that the symbolic representation of the Indian nation as a mother that is suffering, that needs to be salvaged, becomes, I mean, that is the force that shapes the image of Bharat Mata, a grieving, mourning, almost enslaved mother that needs to be freed. That actually inspires the call for freedom among the Swadeshis. So, we have already talked about the extremists and the moderates, and we see that among the extremists there is this tendency tear off from to break off from the Western style of thought. They want to celebrate. There is a revivalist tendency where they want to celebrate the Indian tradition. So, here we see, especially among the extremists, among the Swadeshis, the terrorists, the ones that were called terrorists, they would invoke, they would worship the goddess, especially Durga or Kali, and that is the imagination that also speaks to and inspires the figure of Mother India, right. For the first time, so we see the character of Mother India being portrayed for the first time by nationalist Bengali writer Bankim Chandra Chatterjee for his novel Anandamath. In Anandamath, we see the sannyasi revolution. So, the urge for reforming of the urge for reviving the tradition. So, the revivalist tendency is something that we see a lot among the extremists, and before going for their so called terrorist mission against the British Raj, they would invoke goddesses such as Durga and Kali. So, in Anandamath we see the song, the composition of Vande Mataram for the first time, and in the end of Vande Mataram, I have repeated this earlier also, I remember, we talk about Tvam hi Durga, so the nation imagined as Durga. So, as we see the iconography of Bharat Mata demonstrates, she is very similar, her imagination, her portrayal is very similar as that of Durga. So, the entire nation, the geopolitical land, the geopolitical space of India is imagined as Durga. She rides either a lion or a tiger, and she has a matronly smiling appearance, and so she is the fierce mother that is that represents the terrible, the bhayankar or the terrible for the enemy, and yet she is offering, she is bestowing abhay or fearlessness to her children, the inhabitants of India. So, Bharat Mata acts as a moving force, an inspirational force for Indian nationalism, and she is recurrently shown on banners and flags, and we see her painting as imagined by artists such as Abanindranath Tagore and Amrita Shergill. So, even after independence, we see this concept of the sacrificing mother bringing up virile sons. In so many of these Bollywood films, the Bollywood is deeply influenced and inspired by the idea of Bharat Mata. We have a film called Mother India, made a few years after the partition, and so there we see that the mother is single-handedly bringing up the children. So I mean, when we talk of Mother India, we have a range of meanings. She, to begin with, is docile, she is a provider, she is resourceful, and yet in the absence of the consort, in the absence of the husband, like we see in the film Bharat Mata, the woman is single-handedly undertaking so many tasks. She is tilling the land like a male. Traditionally, it is supposed to be a male's job to work on the farms and in the land, and yet she is also cooking and tending her children, she is bringing them up, and she is also rendering justice. So, there is we could call it as a feminist standpoint that she takes towards the end of the film, where her son has molested a woman. He has allegedly molested a woman. The viewers know, the audience know that it's a false allegation, but nonetheless she actually decides to kill the son. So that's the range of meanings, all concentrated around the Bharat Mata. She is the suffering mother who also renders justice. She doles out love and care. It has its very populist and emotional appeal, no doubt. So, in the words of S. Ramaswamy, Bharat Mata is shown as a woman whose body defines the subcontinent's borders from 1930 onwards, and she is unmistakably the fetish object of Indian nationalists, of Indian nationalism. The fetish object of Indian nationalism. So, she appeals to and mobilizes both men and women alike, and she covers the widest meaning of the term, right. So, two leaders, especially when we talk of in the context of Indian freedom movement, two leaders have at least been deeply influenced and inspired by the figure of the Bharat Mata, and they devised this symbol towards mobilizing the women. The meaning of Bharat Mata was used significantly. I mean, the figure of the Bharat Mata was invoked as a way of involving women in the mass struggle against the Britishers. So, women's engagement was a major concern, Mahatma Gandhi and Subhash Chandra Bose. So, they were actually telling the people, the Indian people, that unless women fully participate in the making of the new India, the process would remain incomplete. So, they actively invented new roles that were hitherto not performed by women, and they evoked the figures of Durga and Kali as examples for Indian women, especially in the formation of Indian National Army. Bose significantly and urges women to come out, follow the example of Durga and serve the nation, come to the nation's aid, right. So, women are no longer, we see a kind of irony here, where women are no longer bound to the literally to the space of, to the domicile space. Women are not literally bound to the domicile space anymore. However, it is the ideology of the domestic space, it is the values of the domestic space that women need to carry for their service in the public arena. So, all the women are coming out, joining the job force, they are joining anti-colonial struggles, they are participating in marches. The values that they embody and they carry have a lot to do, or they are very much analogous to the traditional roles that they would serve, or the traditional functions that they would fulfill within the domestic space. So, besides Kali and Durga, we also see that Gandhi is repeatedly alluding to another figure, female figure, which is Sita. So, Gandhi would talk about the devoted wife of Ram, Lord Rama, from Ramayana, and Ramayana is supposed to be the most popular epic in the northern part of India, and he would always refer to Sita as an example for women. Gandhi was convinced that women's participation was absolutely crucial for India to win her freedom. So, his political strategy relied on non-violence. So, Gandhi, rather than if Subhash Bose and his INA were invoking Durga and Kali more, then Gandhi adopting the non-violent methods would see Sita as a great symbol for women, a symbol of tolerance that actually would enable the male kin to serve the nation better. So, here we understand that rather than a substantive role, what is asked of women is basically to cooperate with the men. He also relies on other symbolic values such as preoccupation with spinning. Spinning is a way of meditation. He is referring to the charkha a lot, charkha and becoming self-sufficient, the dignity of labor. So, he was actually M.K. Gandhi was referring to the quiet the non-violent modes of strength and power, the power of the mind, and this is something he would say a lot in his speeches regarding the abducted and raped women. He would say that with one's spiritual strength one can be non-violent and still be extremely determined and tide over the difficult times, the absolutely devastating situations that the women were going through. So, in his lectures to women, Gandhi frequently drew analogies between Sita's mythical fight against the demon Ravan and Indian women's fight against the British. So, the purity is something, the purity of Sita is something that he wants the Indian women to emulate and learn from. So, the symbol of Sita was used by the Gandhians, like I have already said, during the recovery operations of the abducted women, and to think of abducted and raped, molested women as Sita was a way of urging their families to espouse the estranged female kin. The goddess figure has, the woman as goddess has two very significant purposes. One vital purpose was the mass appeal. Till a certain point, the goddess, the nation as goddess would appeal to the masses regardless of their community. So, it was, I mean, it fulfilled the vital purpose for any movement through mass mobilization, and this was used in the context of the nationalist fight. So, we see that with her semblance with Durga, she has her empathetic appeal as a mother that needs to be saved by the sons and by the sons. So, here we see a mother-son kinship. So many of the patriotic songs written by poets from different languages and from different regions talk about this mother that needs to be salvaged by the son. She has so many sons, then what is she afraid of? They will salvage her. So, we understand that all the women are seen after the image of the goddess, they coexist, support the cause that men have taken up. The direct children of the Mother India are the sons, the virile sons. So, she is a national symbol, Bharat Mata is a national symbol that deeply touches both men and women, and we are looking at the populist appeal. It is very popular, the popular appeal. And then we have the figure of Sita, who is invoked mainly for the sake of women especially. So, women that are already always seen as violated and as helpless, right. So, Sita is the role model of women, and those are the values that they need to emulate while participating in the nationalist struggle for freedom. Sita portrays the ideal codes of gendered conduct for women. So, we are talking about freedom, but in a very controlled fashion. We are talking about the domestic values being transported to the public arena, and through these values one could one could enable the Ram Rajya according to M.K. Gandhi, and Ram Rajya is the idyllic concept. It is an ideal, the idyllic governance that renders justice to one and all. It is just for all the subjects. So, the mobilization caused by the goddess's invocation have two separate and yet unified methods, methods that converge. In the first place, it is with a continuous reference to a battle against an imagined evil. We see a recasting of symbols and terms that are popular among the masses. Sita and Durga offered their potency to the nationalist cause through endowing it with an emotional appeal. So, the emotive content in these symbols are something one needs to understand. No one can ignore them. And then goddess's invocation turns a political goal into a sacred one. We see religion and politics getting interspersed and almost serving, one is serving the purpose of the other. So, they are almost exchangeable. The ongoing conflict is given a religious dimension, a spiritual appeal. So, we see this nationalist struggle being converted into a conflict between the good and the evil. So, nation worship is almost like a yajna, right, where it is a holy cause that is meant to protect the inhabitants, the children of the nation. So, invocation of the goddess legitimizes women's role in the movement. So, as a result of these two processes, which is especially essential for women, and transformation of political action into religious terms changes its fundamental nature. When engaging with politics that was formerly associated with the public arena and something that had only men as major participants, there is a change, there is a sudden change in the public space. We see that women start participating. The politics that was only a kind of homosocial discourse had started including women. It had opened its arms, and it had opened possibilities for women, but one sees that fulfilling political duty becomes akin to fulfillment of one's religious duty. So, the question of including women in roles outside of the domestic space is the power that is required is possible only as a result of invoking the goddess. Women can participate in politics only through invoking and emulating the goddess. There is a degree of freedom offered as a result. We see that women can walk on the street, they can socialize with strangers and associate even with the opposite gender that are not from family, that they are not familiar with, and even then women would not compromise their dignity, their respectability. So, the traditionally masculine activities were opening up for the women. But then the image of the goddess was very important so women should be molded through those values, in terms of those values. We see in this context a very important novel written by Rabindranath Tagore, The Home and the World. In Bengali it is called Ghore Baire. So, we see a very ordinary looking household woman called Bimala, who wants to become visible within the lattice of the nation. She suddenly has, amid all the struggles and the turmoils, the tumultuous situation in the society, she has the wish to render some service, and we see her wish being recognized by Sandeep, who appears to be a fierce nationalist, and he sees the goddess Jagadhatri, or the one that holds the earth, in Vimala, right. So, the extraordinary being discovered, the extraordinary qualities being discovered in the ordinary woman, right. And however, we see something problematic about the fierceness in Sandeep's nationalism. At one point, he is asking himself, am I simply constructed in language? Am I just a book constructed of flesh and blood? So, after a point, he becomes the kind of leader that wants to hear the echo of his own speeches. He is narcissistic, he is obsessed and fixated with his own ideas. Comparatively, and Sandeep would imagine Vimala, who is his friend's wife, as the icon of, so Sandeep invokes his devotional stream towards the nation through iconization of Vimala as goddess. He would see Vimala as the mother nation, and not only mother nation, there is a deep intimate relationship between the two. We see where Vande Mataram actually changes in the case of Vimala and Sandeep to Vande Priyam, nation as beloved, and Vande Mohinim, nation as the enticing one. In comparison, what we see is the figure of Vimala's husband Nikhilesh, who is comparatively a more understated person. He is a zamindar, and we see that while Sandeep's imagination of nation is and of the woman is extremely forceful, is deeply invested with emotionality and rhetoric, comparatively Nikhilesh's view of nation and nationalism is far less romantic. It is actually tied to the real coordinates of the real people, of the common masses, and rendering mundane services to them. So, it is much more ordinary. It is not extremely romanticized, and so it does not appeal Vimala. She is more attracted to the idea of nation that is being catered by Sandeep, of course. And so, for Nikhilesh, she would still be an extraordinary through her ordinary appeal. I mean, she need not be the goddess in order to be dear to him, but Sandeep actually puts her on the pedestal of the goddess, and that is what enthralls Vimala. So, we see that unlike Sandeep, Nikhilesh need not deify the nation or his own wife. He need not have an icon in front of him to have to serve the nation. Moving to Veena Das's understanding of mourning, when we talk of communal identity and women's body, Veena Das says, I quote, "In the work of mourning in many societies, it is the transactions between language and body, especially in the gender division of labor, by which the antiphony of language and silence creates the world in the face of tragic loss." Unquote. So, bodies of women on which desire for nationalism was brutally inscribed bore the memory of future. So, the symbols of nation would be inscribed on women's bodies, and yet these narratives of nation are not transposed at the level of a family. So, although there is a kind of rift where women are at the same time goddess, and yet they are recipients of violence, of discrimination at an everyday level, a kind of gap that is incommensurable, and that cannot be bridged. So, the national rhetoric constitute the threshold, the metaphysical threshold within which the ordinary lives are lived. And of course, such a rhetoric is much more glamorous than the realities of everyday life. Veena Das would say that women are excluded from the originary imagination of national social order. Their reproductive facility is seen to be rightly belonging to the state, as the legitimate sons are taken into the nation's services. Das also says that violation of woman's body by rape is seen as an offence against the property rights of the man who is her guardian. It is the same situation as we see in the case of in the discourse of Sati, where between the bad Hindu and the good Hindus debate, the figure of the woman actually vanishes, although the debate is centering her body. So, in the genre of lamentation, women have control both through their bodies and through their language. So, grief is articulated, like Das observes, through inflicting grievous hurt on oneself in bodily terms, in psychic terms, making present the inner state, and then finally giving grief, and then it is grief is finally given a home in language. Grief is enacted as a spectacle. So, it is Delhi Journal M.K. Gandhi writes about the exchange of women and prisoners and urges the return of Muslim women as a gesture of repentance from on the part of India. Nehru asks Hindu women to accept Hindu men. Jawaharlal Nehru asks Hindu men to accept women that had been abducted and not to punish them for what happened to them. So, the everyday brutality that is already present in the Indian society gets simply amplified. It takes a more extreme form during the formation of the different nations in the nation building projects. So, we see that nationalism and communalism are twin concepts and established when a woman's body is appropriated without her consent or consultation for the cause of the nation, both in terms of so there are two possibilities, either she is deified or she is subjected to violation, and both are actually anti to women's fundamental rights, and they are done through, and that is how, that is the natural process for formation of the nationalist history. The objectification of grief on the body, both in terms of surface and depth as well as in terms of language, bears witnesses to the loss that has been inflicted. So, we cannot but mention a work by Shauna Singh Baldwin. The novel says what the body remembers. So, women's remembrance are actually located on their body. We see in classic in literary classics such as in India's mythological imagination, we see war victory and defeat were etched on the bodies of the women. So, the vilap of Gandhari or Mandodari in Mahabharata or Ramayana respectively, after the slaying of their kin. So, men are timelessly the enactors, they are the participants in the discourse of war, in the nation shaping process. Women are at the backdrop and they perform the vilap, and they are taken as war prize. So, their body remembers the aftermath of a victory or a defeat in the war, right. So, the acoustic and linguistic codes make the loss public, the performance of grief by a group of women. We have the culture of Rudali, after someone dies and they are a group of women, and through adding a performative dimension to the laments, it is a kind of purgation. Group act of lamentation becomes an act of purgation. So, women witness the death, they do not perform the ritual for the dead. However, they wear the sign of grief on their body, and their bodies are, from women witnessing death to wearing the sign of possession of their body by the adversary, women actually carry the meaning of mourning at a more permanent level, if we may. So, men only perform the ritual of death. So, the recollections of pain and grief are compared to poison by Das. As she says, even the idea that we should recover the narratives of violence becomes problematic when we realize that such narratives cannot be told unless we see the relation between pain and language that a culture has evolved. Do we have a grammar? Do we have the language available in a given society to articulate the pain that a woman has undergone? That is a fundamental question that Das asks. So, the poisonous knowledge of partition, can that be transferred? Can that be transported? Can that be written down on pen and paper? So, I think I should stop at this point today, and let us meet once again for the next round of discussions. Thank you so much.